For many years, I had planned to make a review of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. However, said task has proven very difficult, and so I decided to split it up into 4 parts, one for each season. And with this being the first, let's start at the beginning. Yu-Gi-Oh! Started as a manga, which was later adapted into an anime. The series was about all sorts of games. However, the fictional Duel Monsters card game was such an attention grabber that the whole show got rebooted, with said game being front and center. This transition was less than graceful. The rules were very clunky initially, needing to be changed at the start of Season 2. Practically half of the show's run consisted of filler arcs, and the final part of the show was mostly set in ancient Egypt, with Duel Monsters mostly absent, likely having been the planned conclusion from the start before the card game got center stage. It must have been a troubled production, but the franchise kept making a ton of money with the card game, so there was a desire to carry on as soon as possible. And so, just a week after the finale of the series in Japan, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX premiered. While for the audience, no real time has passed, in universe, there is a 10-year gap between the two shows. The game of Duel Monsters became so popular that entire schools were built to teach students how to get better at it. The first one being Duel Academy. And it is where the main character of the show, Jaden Yuki, enrolled. He doesn't pay much attention in class, which is part of why his teacher, Professor Crowler, hates him. Same goes with students like Chaz Princeton, who are annoyed that someone as worthless as Jaden is in the academy. Nonetheless, our protagonist is able to make friends, and with them at his side, he discovers some secrets that the academy holds, eventually leading him to battles which might endanger the safety of the whole world. This premise is more than serviceable. However, there are many elements that do bother me about it. For one, our protagonist has no big motivation to enter the academy other than just playing against the best. Not even for the sake of becoming the best himself, it's just about having fun. Fittingly to such ambitions, he severely lacks theoretical knowledge of the game, which is why he barely got enough points to pass the entrance exam, and ended up in the worst dorm on campus. The only thing he has going for him is that his deck is really strong, or at least that's what the script tries to tell us. It's a show about a guy who makes it into a supposedly exclusive school, but doesn't want to use this opportunity to improve himself or anything. He just wants to have fun. And that pisses me off because of how much Jaden gets to shine. In the first episode, he's late, bumps into Yuki from the original show, and gets a card from him, seemingly branding him as the chosen one. Then he comes late to the practical exam. Dr. Crowler is being a dick and decides to play against him with his own personal masterclass deck. But Jaden still manages to win. He doesn't even second guess that he's fighting against something that's way too strong. Not a care in the world, which really lowers the stakes. Okay, to be fair, he's playing cards in a school setting. Losing a game will not result in anyone dying or losing their soul. But it does still come off a bit like showing off. Look at this daredevil here. Isn't he awesome? He never worries and practically never loses. This really feels like a waste given how he's a freshman at a school. What if Jaden played against someone and lost? And then during a class, he understood what he did wrong, adjusted his strategy, and won in a rematch, teaching the audience something about deck building or the game in general. Nah, let's focus on showing how awesome Jaden is, a character who truly doesn't have much going for him. He doesn't really complain about being in a shitty dorm, nor about his teacher trying to get him expelled. he's just happy to be challenged. Sure, that is a positive attitude, but I don't find it very compelling. The closest to a personal thing about Jaden is his unique ability to see dual monster spirits, something which he supposedly sort of could do since he was a child, but it only truly awakened as a power after he got the Winged Kuriboh card from Yugi, becoming his partner, so to speak. Now, the idea of a Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist having a pal who helps them during duels that most people can see is a concept that appeared before and after GX. However, I feel like this show has the worst execution of it. Winged Kuriboh doesn't talk, doesn't have a defined complex personality, doesn't contribute much at all to the show, he's just a huge fluff ball, and so it's unsurprising that he would be appearing less and less over time as the show goes on. But okay, enough ranting about the protagonist and his pet. Let's talk about the episodes themselves. The progression of the story is rather weird. Episode 2 has Jaden dueling against Chaz Princeton, who tries to prove the victory against Professor Crowler was just luck. The duel then gets interrupted, and there's no conclusion. Okay, I get it. The rivalry between these two will be a big thing across the whole season, and only much later do we get to see who was better in the end, right? Well, okay, there are two problems with that. One, the episode ends with Jaden declaring what sort of cards he'd use if the game was allowed to carry on. Just something for the children in the audience that were worried that Mr. Perfect wasn't going to win. And two...
That's game!
He wins! Just 2 episodes later, he plays against Chaz and wins for real. What was the point of this? What did we gain by dragging this out with one filler episode in between? Actually, speaking of those, there's a lot of them, and okay, in all fairness, I can tolerate some of them, especially when they give us insight into the side characters. However, you give me an episode about a dueling monkey, 2 weirdos who play dress up at night, or a Tarzan wannabe, and I groan about how stupid things are getting and how much time we're wasting. Frick, that last one might sting the most. It's about a student at the academy who was really bad at drawing cards, so he decided to live in the wild and master predicting what cards he'd draw. It's a ridiculously stupid plot, but there was potential for something here. You cannot get good at drawing cards. Randomness is an essential part of the game. Now, of course, this is an obvious fact that anyone with the talent and skill to make it into this pristine academy should have. But as a topic for an episode meant to teach the basics of the game to the children watching, it could have worked. If you drew a bad card and lost the game, why do you have that card in your deck in the first place? Rethink your deck and try to make it consist of cards that will be of value to you in as many scenarios as possible. Also, make sure that your deck is at the minimum deck size to reduce the number of possibilities. But of course, the lesson that the episode gives us is that you never know what you'll draw, and that makes things fun. Thanks, Jaden. You are ever so helpful. Well, okay, I've been ranting for a while. Let's talk about some episodes that I did actually enjoy. After being caught at the abandoned dorm, a restricted area of the academy, Jaden and his best pal Cyrus are given a trial by combat. If they win a duel, they will not be punished, but if they lose, they get expelled. While Jaden is not too worried, Cyrus is scared. The two play a game for practice, which Cyrus loses, of course, but it is shown that he had a card that could have helped him out, but he didn't use it because of a childhood trauma related to it. We learn that Cyrus's brother Zane is the best student at the whole academy, and he scolded his brother back then for trying to use said card, and it hurts till this day. Jaden then challenges Zane to a duel and actually loses. Both players respect each other, and Cyrus learns not only how the card is meant to be used, but also what mentality one should have in the face of failure. And it is by using this knowledge that Jaden and Cyrus manage to beat the impossible odds and win. Now, in all fairness, the storyline was far from perfect. The fact that Cyrus was able to make it into the academy, but was still too stupid to understand what mistakes he made as a child and how the card is supposed to be actually used is beyond ridiculous. Also, if he was scared of using this card, why did he keep it in his deck? And why, in the middle of this whole set of episodes, did we need this stupid filler about Jaden and Cyrus's roommate Chumley? But even with that in mind, the initial starting story with the abandoned dorm did set things up for later in the season, and we did learn about Alexis's missing brother. Then there's the fact that it is about a character needing to learn a lesson, which he does. And of course, Jaden loses to Zane. This had me really excited the first time I was watching, because, well, after not being too fond of how the series started, I was positively surprised that Jaden was allowed to lose a game. I will even say that it made him more likable to me for a moment, because, him being all positive and cheerful when he wins all the time feels rather hollow. On the other hand, him keeping up that smile after a failure is admirable. It had me sort of hopeful that the show would have more duels end this way, but in the end, it remained a rare sight. Aside from this, there were other stories that I would label as quite okay. There was one about Chaz leaving Duel Academy, joining a different one, only to later return to get his revenge, getting a small story arc for himself. Then there was the story about Bastion playing against Jaden, while using a deck that prevents Jaden from using the polymerization card. And finally, a big duel against a guy who stole Yugi's deck. Which, Jaden wins, but it's just a copycat, so I don't take as much issue with this one. Honestly, thinking about the first half of this season, all the stuff that I like has two-part episodes or episodes leading into one another. This gives the story more room to breathe. There is less time spent with one-off characters. Instead, we use the opportunity to explore pre-established ideas and characters. One could argue that there's a whole bunch of these stories, but sadly my brain lumps them all together into one, and for each of those we get like 2 or 3 stupid filler episodes, and that makes watching the show feel that much worse. But hey, that's just the first half. In the second half, things get supernatural. Of course, some of those elements appeared in the show before, but they felt different back then, like the whole dual monster spirits shenanigans. These spirits exist, but it's just specific characters seeing them, and it doesn't actively impact anything. Even Jinzo manifesting in the real world in that one episode is a story that could be cut and nothing would have changed. Then there was that duel against that guy in the abandoned dorm where, yes, weird things did happen, but the guy was a fraudster using special effects, so Jaden and the rest assumed that everything they saw had to be fake, which I think is a fair way to explain why they don't take this seriously at all. The second half, however, immediately starts by having the main cast be transported into another world where Jaden gets a part of a special medallion, and upon returning to the academy, the chancellor of the school announces that the Shadow Riders are coming. 2 professors and 5 students get spirit keys and are tasked with protecting them, because if the bad guys get them, they'll unleash the power of the sacred beasts, which endanger the whole world. All of a sudden, we went from a story about students at an academy where weird things might happen to a story where the whole world is supposedly in danger. Now, I won't act like I was watching the show with the belief that the stakes would never reach this point. However, I do find it incredibly unceremonious that with all the breadcrumbs in the story, the whole abandoned dorm, the disappearance of Alexis's brother, our heroes are simply told by their chancellor that things are happening and they're the ones to take care of it. Now, yes, we later see stuff that proves that there is some sort of connection between these things, and the brother of Alexis is even found, but the whole introduction of it all feels so lame and rushed. Frankly, I have some suspicions that there was some executive meddling behind the scenes. When I say first half and second half, I do mean that literally, as the first season had 52 episodes, with the shift to the weird stuff happening right after episode 26. It's like they had an idea to introduce some things into the series, but the ratings and feedback from those initial episodes made some people behind the scenes aware that kids wanted things to be more like during the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Show. So, all of a sudden, we have a protagonist with a special magical medallion that is part of a set of 7 items that all contain an Egyptian eye symbol, and they're all connected to 3 legendary cards that should never fall into the bad guy's hands. This feels less like a callback and more like a poor attempt at rehashing successes of the past. It doesn't work on so many levels. For one, I dislike how wasted the idea of the 7 spirit keys is. 7 heroes, eh? Half of them lose their first game and the key with it. Alexis and Chaz get to win 1 game, but then lose. And the whole rest goes to Jaden, who just keeps winning time and time again. He even has his medallion repel some tricks that the bad guys try to use on him. I also find it boring how the villains themselves don't exactly have motivation to get these keys, other than the fact that their boss wants them. They feel more like mercenaries than people with a drive to see the sacred beasts reawakened. By the way, said boss turns out to be the former chairman of the academy. He was the one to place the cards under the academy, where they would feast on the dual energy that is generated when card games are played. The games with the Shadow Riders were enough to make everything work, and now this old man will use the energy of dual spirits to become young again with the help of the sacred beasts. Dear God, I could spend hours explaining all of the issues that I have with this guy, but I'll just focus on 2 things. 1. Why does Kagamaru need to use the 3 sacred beasts to regain youth? One of his Shadow Riders was an Agent Pharaoh which he himself had brought back to life. If he can do that, then what's stopping him from helping himself? And 2, why are dual monster spirits such a big thing all of a sudden? Yeah, we had a few characters who could see them, some have appeared on the island in physical form, but it did nonetheless feel like they were not that important in the grand scheme of things. It might just be me, but I feel like the whole Dual Academy Island should have been established as a place with a stronger connection to the Dual Monsters world, and the creatures from those cards could appear on the island. And with that established, it would kind of be natural that there would be some benefit to putting the Sacred Beasts cards on the island so that they could feast on the energies of this place. But all of this is never directly stated in the show. Dual monster spirits were a concept that wasn't given primary nor even secondary focus. It was so far in the back that when in the final battle, the three Sacred Beasts devour all of the dual monster spirits, and this results in cards all over the world going blank, I was just rolling my eyes at how stupid the plot has gotten. Anyway, once the duel ends, Kakamaru grows old again, Jaden forgives him, and we get a dumb episode with Chumley, and then a final duel between Zane and Jaden, a rematch from earlier. And it's a true passing of the torch moment, as Zane is leaving the academy, and now Jaden can become the new best duelist on campus. And with that, Season 1 is over. Oh boy, what a mess that was. And yet I must admit that it wasn't anywhere as bad as I remembered. Focusing on the first half of the show, while I was annoyed at how overpowered Jaden got to be and how much time was wasted with filler episodes, I do sort of see how they wanted this show to be different from the original, with a regular school setting and all. Yes, it's true that already early on they have sown the seeds for more fantastical plot points, but they wanted to take their time getting to it. It's just too bad that they did so with dumb filler episodes. So much time was wasted to where when the second half came along, everything was thrown at the screen at once in a rushed and incomplete state. This show has its fans, and rewatching it this time, I feel like I have more of an understanding for what they enjoy about it, even if I don't quite share the sentiment. I could sit here and complain about all the little elements, small inconsistencies and oddities, like how the abandoned dorm was established to have belonged to Obelisk Blue in the Japanese original, or how Kakamaru was the founder of the whole academy while the dub claims that Seto Kaiba built it. And let's not even get into all the oddities with those stupid shadow writers. None of that really matters. In the end, GX was simply a show that was different from the original in many ways, and I didn't like the changes on a personal level. There were bigger problems, but the fans don't seem to mind, and they're having a good time watching it regardless. This wasn't the case for me, neither now nor back when it premiered. In all fairness, however, my younger mind did go overboard with the hatred, because of what Jaden reminded me of. A school setting obviously made me think of my own time in elementary school, high school, and later at universities and colleges. I always had trouble with those, never getting great scores in most subjects, but I always accepted it, telling myself that I'm simply dumb and stupid, that I can't get any better. But then I would see someone who I perceived as dumber than me, a complete slacker, someone who clearly doesn't work as hard as I do, but still manages to score better than me. It would always drive me mad, because while bullies scared me, I could always tell myself that they had no future, as shown by our grades, and someday my work would be rewarded. But then I saw these slackers, and it messed with my idea of how the world should work. These clowns would get no problems with bullies, be popular, have friends, and get better at class than I did. And so, seeing a TV series seemingly glorifying that did frustrate me. Now, of course, this wasn't what the creators of the show intended to convey with Jaden. It was a basic wishful fantasy of going to a school, slacking off, and still getting by because you are great at card games. An appealing fantasy to many, but not me. We are all different people with different personalities, talents, skills. And we shouldn't be making judgments on who deserves what based on some basic traits of a person. All of the people who annoyed me were either talented at a particular thing that I wasn't, or after school they simply did their homework and learned, despite of how they presented themselves on the school corridor. Things were not as simplistic as I had told myself back then. However, seeing a show on TV where the main guy is acting exactly the way that I saw these slackers at school ignited my rage and reaffirmed my beliefs. Yes, this is a real problem, and this evil show glorifies it. Of course, now, after all these years, I realize that that's not the case. And more importantly, I have learned that to find happiness, one must stop comparing themselves to others. It doesn't matter who's better than you, who achieves more than you, and it doesn't matter if they deserve or don't deserve what they have. In the end, you must find success on your own terms, and if you do that, then you can find true happiness. Wow. So I guess I managed to finally cover the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. It's finally done! Gosh, I've said so much that I'm beginning to second-guess my initial decision. What will I even talk about once the second season comes up? I mean, it's not like it's any different in terms of style, quality, writing, or anything of the sort, right? It's the same exact show, and there is nothing noteworthy to talk about, right? Right? Okay, I hope that's enough sarcasm for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the future when I'll eventually talk about the second season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I'll see you all then.